It's our death day.
Hey, it's our death day.
Guys, have we done this before? Is it our death day again?
I think it's our death day again. Have we recorded this episode already?
I think it's already
Did we record it yesterday?
Didn't we,
We recorded it on the 14th, didn't we?
Yeah.
Wait, what's today?
Oh my god, it's the 14th.
Oh, no!
Oh, fuck! Hello and welcome to the Pod People, the show where, like us, you can relive the same horrible day over and over again. I'm an actual tree, Matisse Van Rossum.
And I am the time loop Ben Sheets.
And I'm the baby man. Cleveland Mosher.
It's not only our death day, but yours too. Happy one.
To you.
To you.
See, I almost went with sissy, but I didn't want to call myself a sissy, so...
You wouldn't.
Coward. Yeah, we're talking about Happy Death Day and Happy Death Day to you. Let's do the thing.
The talking thing.
I didn't prepare a cold open, so we're just jumping into it.
Yeah. Well, the first Happy Death Day came out in 2016, I believe. Was it 2016 or 2015?
I think it's 2017. I don't think it's that old.
Was it a Tuesday?
Oh, yeah, it was 2017.
Yeah, 2017.
So, yeah, the first movie came out in 2017. It was directed by Christopher Landon, who also wrote it. The premise is a girl goes through a day, and at the end of the day, she's killed. And suddenly, she wakes up in the same bed she woke up in the last day. And she realizes that, hey, I'm reliving the same day over and over again, kind of Groundhog's Day style.
It's Groundhog Day if it was a horror movie.
Yeah, essentially.
I remember seeing the previews for this movie, and I always thought, that looks fun. Maybe I'll go see it. And I never did. And now the second one just came out, and we had an excuse to watch it, and I'm glad we did.
Yeah, my experience was a little different. I saw the trailer for the first one and was pretty meh about it. Like, I didn't think it would be something I'd be interested in. I just wasn't feeling it. It looked a little too pop. It looked like it was outside of my demographic and not really my thing. And boy, was I wrong.
Yeah, I will say I expected to enjoy the first one. I didn't expect to enjoy it for the reasons that I did.
Yeah.
The trailer certainly made it look a lot more like a pretty cut and dry slasher film with a supernatural twist, and it's definitely more of a dark comedy in a way that the trailer did not quite reveal, and in a way that I actually really liked.
Yeah, I think it's appropriate to call this movie delightful in a lot of ways, like
Certainly.
we all were discussing earlier. Yeah, I think this movie, with the tone it takes, makes it much less dreary than it could be. And I think it's a lot of fun overall with the slasher elements, In the first one, we see her... The first, 15 minutes are just her going through the first day she experiences. Through that, we glean a lot about who the character is, who the surrounding characters are around her. Because it's funny, it seems like the main character in the first one is so hateable at the beginning that all the characters around her have justifiable reason to want to kill her. And then at the end of the day, you do see her get killed
by a mysterious figure in a baby mask.
I really appreciate that they took their time for the first one, for the first 15 minutes to set everything up, because I think they use a lot of good mileage out of that whole first sequence throughout the movie in really creative ways. You have so many different things happening.
Yeah, well, you get to see her go through those same occurrences in different moods, and that's pretty good comedy material. I mean, it's a classic callback, and it works very well for that.
She takes a path from where she starts, where she wakes up, point A, and where she ends, point B. It's the path between where she wakes up and her room where we see most of the same stuff repeat. But, you've got all of these points that have to be hit along the way, and as she continues to die and come back to life, everything keeps happening the same way, but her reaction and response to it is different every time. So, like you said, Cleve, that's very much primed for comedy, especially when she starts to get more and more frustrated with it.
Oh yeah, the moment she just sort of embraces it too, and like she's just walking down the street completely naked and like just like finger snapping and pointing at everybody, like doing like the Sam Raimi Spider-Man, like hey.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's a good comparison. I was thinking the same thing in the Spider-Man 3.
Yeah. And I think this movie did it better.
Yeah, it's also a much better movie than Spider-Man 3, but we're not even going to go down that.
But
that
I will say that I think there will be more Sam Raimi comparisons like down the road. I'm going to be making.
I think that's fair. I was very surprised with the arc that our main character takes in this first movie. Who her name is Tree. Which I guess is short for Teresa. Somehow, but
Teresa, yeah.
But even in the credits, her name is Tree, Tree, like an actual tree. So okay, sure, but like you said, Ben, at the beginning of Happy Death Day, Tree is a pretty fucking unlikable person.
Yeah.
Like she's easy for the viewer to hate, and by the end, I was genuinely turned around on her character. Like, by the end, I liked her a lot.
And it's fun, too, because they're really well-written, like, love-to-hate moments. Like, all the interactions with the sorority girls are a stitch. And the premise is made clear fairly early on. And so you're placed in this really nice situation where you get to watch this character you hate get killed multiple times. And that's great. And that was really fun. And I, too, was taken aback by her inevitably finding love in, like, all the wrong places, like, or by, like, becoming a better person by getting killed repeatedly.
Yeah, I like that, too. And I think that's part of what makes the movie strong is because it is the exact same premise as Groundhog Day, so this is something that has been done, not just, like, once, but multiple times. So this is not by any means a new premise. So
but bringing it into the horror genre is fairly new in a lot of ways.
Yes, like this film took from a lot of different both films definitely referenced a lot of things, and I think that they wear their influences well on their sleeve and openly reference them regularly. And I appreciate that. I think that's the way to do it. For sure. Like, this film gets meta, like, really nicely. Like, the meta commentary. And
I think awesome. That the Groundhog Day comparison extends farther than just the actual premise. And I'll get into this more with the second one, but Christopher Landon clearly has a great love and admiration for films of the 80s.
Yes.
Because these films play out very much like 80s films. They're structurally very similar.
I was actually going to pull from a different inspiration. I think this movie was kind of influenced by Scream and Scream 2 in particular, being set in college.
Yeah.
Being very teen-oriented. Doesn't take itself all too seriously. Is kind of meta aware.
Yeah. Scream is definitely meta aware.
I haven't seen Scream 2, but the comparison to the first Scream I think is a good one.
Yeah, I do remember that in the first film they do openly reference Groundhog Day. Like, there is the moment where they're sitting around the cafeteria table and the boyfriend says, "Hey, did you ever see Groundhog Day?" And
that was right at the
very end,
right
before the credits.
Yeah. And I'm actually glad they saved that for the very end, because that kind of made me groan, just because it was so direct. But the fact that it was put at the very end was like, okay, it's a nice capstone.
I think it's
it's a good way to make light of that.
I think that was the perfect place to put it, because obviously the audience is already spending the entire movie making the comparison to Groundhog Day. And if they had said it like midway through the movie, it would, I think, have been
cheap.
Yeah.
Groan inducing. It would have made me roll my eyes. But the fact that like the problem is resolved, everything was,
Mm-hmm.
happy and peachy at the end.
And the film has already made it clear it's gone in its own direction.
And right as the credits are about to roll is like, hey, this is like that movie Groundhog Day. And she's like, what? He's like, you've never seen Groundhog Day? Like, as it's panning up in the
Yeah,
credits.
I thought that was great.
And you know too that they got to gig a lot of that because there had to have been plenty of people who were watching the film or couples watching the film, and one person's then they had that very interaction.
This is just like Groundhog Day. It's like, what?
You've never seen Groundhog Day? And then like for the movie to do it, like reinforce that.
I've never seen Groundhog Day.
Same.
I'm
Really?
well aware of
Interesting.
the film and
good
what
movie.
happens in it.
Puxatawny, Phil, yeah, something like that.
Yeah, I've never actually seen Groundhog Day, but I'm well aware of its position in the zeitgeist.
It's worth watching. It's a good movie. I think this movie goes in its own interesting avenues, though. I think the main strength of this movie is the acting. I think all of the characters are really strong and well-developed characters.
More than they have any right to be for a movie like this.
Yeah. And especially with the setup of Tree being so unlikable, there's a lot of red herrings that are set up with all the different characters. At one point, Tree makes a list of all the people she thinks could have killed her, and it's like every main secondary character in the movie.
All of these people that we see her come into contact with, and it's great because she is such a genuinely unlikable person that it would make sense that any of these people would want to kill her.
And I think it strengthens the element of surprise in the movie because you don't necessarily expect who it actually is.
No, I would say they make it the last person you expect, in that it's the character that you see her interact with maybe the least out of everybody.
Well, and she's the one that has the least beef with, I guess you could say.
The least apparent motive to kill her. She has motive, but not a motive that we are aware of until the end. And obviously, she's not even on Tree's list. Mm-hmm. So she obviously doesn't recognize that motive either.
Because she's selfish too.
Right.
Like it works for her character, which is nice.
I think you're right though. That the acting is surprisingly good. What's the main actress's name? Jessica Roth.
Yeah, she knocks it out.
She's so good.
Yeah, she's really good.
I feel bad because I initially, like in the trailers and at the beginning of the movie, just kind of wrote her off as like
sorority girl actress.
Well, and also because she looks so much like Blake Lively, who I've seen in a lot of things, and I've never seen this chick before. So I just sort of wrote her off as a Blake Lively knockoff, but I think she's actually a much better actress than Blake Lively.
Oh yeah, she's
100%.
She kicks ass, and that's primarily I would say why I felt like the films were outside of my demographic. I was like, it's like a college-y kind of movie. It's just not my thing. And yeah, it couldn't have been more wrong.
It's
just commentary on how shitty like college culture is.
I think I would put it in the same camp as like Cabin in the Woods. I don't think it's as good of a film as Cabin in the Woods by a long shot. And you know, in the same category as Scream as well, where they're extremely meta-referential, they're extremely self-aware, and they're about sort of deconstructing a lot of tropes of the horror genre, but not on the surface level. You know, they come across as very stupid, vapid, shut your brain off entertainment. And they're not. Like I said, I do think Happy Death Day is a step below Cabin in the Woods or Scream.
I think the sequel like really helped elevate it too.
Yes,
anyway.
yes, and
like, I'd watch those films as soon as I watched Cabin in the Woods. I love both of them.
We'll get into that, but the sequel I think took it farther for me as well.
I think the writing in both of them kind of reminded me of Lord and Miller, guys who wrote 21 Jump Street and Lego Movie and stuff like that, because it was so tongue-in-cheek and so back to back to back.
Yes.
You know, you almost get whiplash from it sometimes, but I think that's one of its strongest points. I think the reason, you know, the characters have such a good arc in the movie is because the dialogue is so quick.
Yeah, Rick and Morty vibes for me. Like pretty strong, like with the wacky science fiction stuff, and like they keep stacking like sci-fi tropes on top of each other.
Well, that really comes in the second one. We shouldn't talk too much about that.
True.
Because in the first one, one of the things that I appreciated at the end of the first one is that though she does eventually end up breaking the loop by solving her own murder, the reason that the loop is initiated is never explained or even addressed. I was okay with that in the first one.
I actually really appreciate that because honestly, my opinion is the closer you look into these kind of time loop movies and into the internal logic of them, the more they kind of fall apart.
Oh, right. Well, I mean, that's
And-
exactly what like Doctor Who says.
Correct.
It's all wibbly wobbly, timey wimey, and we all laugh. It's because, oh yeah, don't look too close. It just doesn't make any actual sense.
Correct. And for the most part, I
Yeah.
agree with it. And for a less self-aware, tongue-in-cheek franchise, I would not want to know. And the first one stands alone, you know. I was perfectly content with them never addressing the reason for the time loop, just that she has to end it by figuring out who is killing her and killing them first.
Yeah,
I
in
was
the car
fine
ride
with
back,
that.
you said it pretty well. Like, you don't really know if it's science or if it's magic.
And it is fully explained in the second one. It is basically the entire premise of the second one, but I think the first one stands on its own well enough because you've got the mystery of trying to figure out who she has pissed off enough to want to kill her.
Yeah, and the thing I really like about it too is it makes the movie less about the loop itself and more about the character trying to find that out.
Correct.
You know,
The
and
films have very different goals in the
Yeah.
story they're trying to tell.
and I think that works really well in the first one here.
I really like in the first one as well how once she realizes that every time she dies she's just going to start the same day over, and she loses the fear of death, that we get a really fun montage of her like crossing all of these possible suspects off her list and just doing kookier and kookier stuff. Both of these films utilize montage extremely
Very well.
and montages, and that's one of those things where it really makes me think of like 80s
Yeah.
movies, you know, especially like 80s teen centric movies where you've got these like kooky montages set to whatever pop music is, you know, most popular at that time. And sometimes that can be really obnoxious, but I think that this movie does montage really well.
Yeah, like it's great picks for music. They're shot well. They're fun and snappy. Again, they're self-aware of it. You get a sense that she herself is pretty much aware that she's in like a kooky montage, like the way she's kind of creeping around corners and stuff. Like it's,
Right, and like peeking in windows.
yeah,
and-
and you can't help but laugh with them. And the jokes that they set up during the montages too are some of the strongest in both films.
Yeah.
Like the ex-boyfriend, like you know, finding out that he's gay and whatnot, and like oh, of course, you know, like those bits are all so tropey. And that brings me to a point I wanted to bring up too, which is in the first one there are a lot of like Hallmark specially almost like Disney Channel moments, and I didn't mind them. And I had to ask myself why. To stop and be like,
Right.
I'm so jaded to these things. Like, why was I good for it in this movie? And I think it's the self-aware factor.
Yeah, I think so. I caught myself doing the same thing, and once again, I'll talk about this more when we get into the second one, because it was the same. But I'm so generally turned off by sentimentality in most movies, just because it's always so heavy-handed and feels manipulative, and it always just makes me roll my eyes. Yet in this movie, I did the same thing. I was like, oh, wait a second, like it's making me have the feels. Why am I actually having the feels? It's like, oh, because the tone of the movie sets itself up to not be manipulative, or to rather, I guess, draw attention to the fact that it's being manipulative.
It's a much more popular mechanic now with things like Guardians of the Galaxy, for instance. Like, there's a lot of shows now that exercise tongue in cheek, and they set you up to think you're watching a film that is commentary and that's going to be cynical. And so when it does have those very real moments, it always comes out of left field. Again,
Sure.
because you're ready to laugh at a concept, not to embrace one. So when you do come across it, it always catches you off guard. And I think it's a very effective tool.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the strength lies in the arc of Tree, going from being so unlikable to being such a likable character by the end.
Right.
The development of that as a likable character makes it feel more sincere and less heavy-handed
Yeah.
in a lot of ways.
Right, she's not set up as the character that you're supposed to like and sympathize with, but through her journey and her development, you do start to do so.
And the reason I really love that, and I feel like it works so well, is because it's still through her eyes. We see her come to terms with how much she doesn't like who she is, and like we see her actively choose to change it, as opposed to just the events tell her. You do get a sense of recognition on her part.
Well, it's that sense of reflection that she starts getting as she goes through the same day over and over again, you know?
Right, exactly. And that when she starts to look at how many people would potentially have motive for wanting to kill her, and it's sort of like oh shit, am I really like this bad of a person?
Yeah, it's
like,
to sort of self-reflect.
do these, am I this hateable? Could I really see this many people wanting to kill me? And that self-reflection is really, really nice. And I don't even mind the development of the romance between her and the love interest character.
Yeah, it's cute. It's
that
fine.
stuff would normally piss me off as well, but it also feels natural because like she wakes up in his dorm room every day, and just from having to start the same day over and over again dealing with him, that she starts to fall in love with him.
Because like
just
even when
through
she's at her worst, like he's
always just like a nice guy. And that when she actually like decides to tell him what's happening, like he's actually on board to believe her instead of just being like, oh, get this crazy bitch out of my room, you know?
Yeah, that actually brings us something that another thing that both the films do well, and that's there's a lot of self-awareness to script aspects that can often be really frustrating or annoying or repetitive. This film gets what is too much and what's obnoxious and tends to cut before it gets to that degree. Like you get a vibe like a realism vibe that maybe they've had that conversation a couple of times before, but this is her finally getting that conversation right. You know, it's sort of because of like the montage sequences, it's well alluded to that she's probably died even more times than we get to see, and that she has like a good deal of power in these scenarios with that. Like, and I think that's really fun that she has like these repeat opportunities to have these conversations. We just see the ones where she pulls it off.
Right.
Or, yeah, the interesting parts of it.
Yeah.
You know, they don't over show their hand. One interesting thing I want to talk about a little bit with the relationship part of it with Carter. I did see a hot take online. This is a mini hot take corner, I guess you could say. Taking into context that this movie was written by a middle-aged man, they saw Carter as kind of a conduit for the writer, and this girl falling in love with him as they go along in time felt a little more weird when you look at it in that perspective. I don't know if I agree with it, but I can see where they're coming from a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's kind of, and Jesus Christ, I can't believe that I'm the one who's about to say this, but I feel like that's kind of a fucking cynical way to look at the way movies are written. It definitely isn't something to discount completely, but like every story is written by somebody, you know? And you can't just assume that every character in the film is the writer.
A self-insert.
Is
And
a self-insert.
I think
it
it dodges a lot of that problem just because how well it's performed and edited more than anything.
And considering the fact that she's the only one who remembers every time the day is reset, it's not like Carter is ever taking advantage of her or her situation and like being rewarded for that, unlike something in like Ready Player One, which I know you both have seen but I have not, but like where the prize for winning at the end is you get the guy gets the cute girl, you know, as like that's his trophy as he gets the love interest.
Yeah, she chooses him. And
yeah,
also like he has almost no agency in the narrative.
He has none.
Like, yeah. So if there was going to be a character, honestly, for the writer to insert themselves into, they did it in a fairly safe character because he has no control over the situation.
Carter also has no problems, unlike any other character in the movie. I don't know. I saw that hot take and I wanted to dish it out just because I think it's good fodder for conversation.
Yeah, I disagree with that one. I think that's an overly cynical.
I
way
do
to
see
look
where
at
they're
it.
coming from, though.
I think
Sure.
it's healthy to look for those sorts of things. I'm definitely not discounting like the practice of looking for self-inserts in writing and like the sleazy aspects of having like older male writers like writing those perspectives. I think that those things can be dangerous
and I think
Sure.
whatever, but I don't think this is a case.
I
where
think
I don't think this
you
is the
can
case
look
in this
at,
scenario.
the comparison between this and something like Slender, where teenagers are just written like complete garbage,
Right.
you know?
Yeah, no, that's a very
Like-
good point.
Like, this movie was handled so much better. I did see in the IMDb trivia that originally this movie was originally going to come out around 2007. And
Wow.
it was going to star Megan Fox
Oh,
and
no?
be produced by Michael Bay.
Oh no! You know, it's funny
That's
because
rough.
I can see like the production aspects are kind of similar, like, and I mean that like more from a lot of behind the curtain kind of ways. Like the funding of this film there's a lot of product placement in it, and again it has that saccharine kind of
What do you?
aspect.
What
Yeah,
product,
what product
What,
placement?
Oh, there's a lot of car
did it
product
ever
placement?
Try to sell.
Like with in the sequel, for instance, when the guy's getting out of his car, like it's made very clear that it's
the
a
Kia Soul.
yeah, exactly. So you
But-
remember the brand.
Yeah, no,
Like-
that, but also that's the second one and not the
Yeah.
one we're talking about. And that's the only instance I can think of.
Yeah.
No, in the first one, there's the car alarm going off.
What kind of car was that?
It's a Nissan. Is it an Altima?
I did not notice that at all.
Yeah, I didn't notice that either. But I think the point that hot take was making, you can see the potential for that to be a problem if it was a Michael
Sure.
Bay
Fuck yeah.
produced
Oh,
movie.
God, it'd be
Well,
awful.
You know,
Like,
all of that is
absolutely.
in the script. I think the execution of the script makes it less problematic.
One thing that I did notice that I didn't realize is Christopher Landon's other films that he has written, and a couple of which he's directed.
Whoa.
Oh man, it's
boy.
not great. I don't know if you guys saw it. Eugene and I watched this movie called Viral that was really bad a
have
couple
not
of years
seen
ago.
that. No.
Dude wrote and directed Paranormal Activity 4 or Paranormal Activity 5, the marked ones, which is trash. Also wrote Paranormal Activity 4, which is trash. Wrote Paranormal Activity 3, which is my favorite of the bunch. Wrote the screenplay for Paranormal Activity 2, and also wrote Disturbia. So I'm extremely confused.
He hit his stride, I guess.
I
with
guess
this.
Figured it
So-
out, you know? You gotta, sometimes.
It's weird too, because like I think Paranormal Activity 3 is the best out of all of them, and he
Oh.
also wrote the worst ones.
It's
Or some of the
inevitable that
worst
we're
ones.
gonna have a paranormal
Yeah, we'll get
activity
around-
episode.
we'll get around
I
to that.
dread it, but it'll
We don't
happen.
have to.
We'll get around to
You
that.
don't have to have that.
I can absolutely, in my mind's eye, see this movie as starring Megan Fox and produced by Michael Bay. I can picture this really bad movie in my head, and it's so close to being this movie. And the fact that this movie didn't turn out to be a disgusting, cynical piece of shit is kind of a miracle.
Well, and I think all you have to do is look at the misogyny of Megan Fox in the Transformers movie
Yes.
to realize what that movie would be.
would have been like, yeah.
You know, the alternate version of
It
this,
would have been a
the
self-insert.
the alternate timeline, so to say, of this. But I think that's why this stuff works so well. Is the strength of Jessica Roth, the strength of the other performances, the editing,
Yeah.
the change of direction.
There were a few moments in this where they did some legitimately very cool editing things that I would not have expected from a movie like this. Like during I guess it's at the end of her montage where she's being killed over and over again, and she gets like hit in the head with like a baseball bat or something, and like it in slow motion like follows her head down, and it like transitions into her head hitting the pillow where she wakes up the next
I
day.
thought that was
Oh,
great.
that was
Oh
fucking
yeah,
dope.
because you see like in the background like it shift from the nighttime forest to the back wall of the room. Tucked
Yeah,
head.
No, like it did.
They do that twice. Like she gets hit in the head, and there's the one where she's falling.
That was in the second one.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, fuck. I get up. I'm getting mixed up. Non-stop. Sorry. Yeah.
Well, I think it's because in a lot of ways the second one feels very much like a continuation of the first one. I mean, on that note, do we want to go ahead and rate this one and move into the second one, or do y'all have more points that you want to bring up specifically
no,
about
I think
this one?
that's pretty much it. I think we hit all of the main points.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end, it turns out her roommate was the one who was trying to kill her because Tree was banging their professor and her roommate was jealous about it. So, and then Tree kicked her out a window, which was pretty rad, and she squeaked and died.
And then they just let Tree go.
Yeah, seemed like there were no consequences to that.
Self-defense, I guess.
Yeah. Another quick thing. I think we already talked about like how much we liked the scoring. Bear McCreary kicked ass.
Yeah, I was
it.
very pleasantly surprised by the score in this first one.
One thing I particularly liked was whenever the killer appeared, like his little beat in the music was like the
like a distorted baby
sound.
laugh.
I liked it. It wasn't over the top. Like you almost can't tell what it is at first, and that it was. I found it to be effective.
I love that the killer wears a baby mask because this college is called Bayfield University, and they're the Bayfield Babies.
Yeah,
which is like the funniest, stupidest mascot.
Such a weird.
It's fun.
Mascot.
It's fun too because it means like the killer just like grabbed whatever was around it, like instead of like applauded, like "Ooh, I'm the scary baby man." It's like just that there was a baby mask, and
Yet
so
at
he
the
grabbed
same
it.
time, there's the obvious symbolism of birthdays and being reborn and living the same day over again and starting new.
Babies
So
are a
the
symbol of
baby-
life, so it's ironic
Right.
that he kills her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, what'd you think of the mask design for the baby?
I thought
it was great.
I thought it was great.
I love it.
I thought it was.
It's appropriately creepy while not being like
Believable
in
too.
your
Like,
face.
some
creepy,
mascots are
you
fucking
know?
creepy
I think I
looking.
saw that it was designed by the same dude who did the Scream mask for the original movie. Which,
simplicity.
yeah,
at
it
its
makes a lot of
finest.
sense.
Yeah,
You know,
no, I can totally
cool.
I can totally get down with that. Yeah, I agree. It's like it's one of those things where it's not over the top, but it's in context appropriately creepy. Like you see the other students walking around with them on for like the basketball game or whatever.
in
and
the
it's
second
like-
one.
Yeah, but I mean, in the first one too, like when she's going to the party the first time,
Yeah,
she gets
yeah,
killed,
yeah,
she
yeah.
sees a group of people that are wearing the baby masks, and it's like, then it just looks stupid because it's like a dumb college pride, sports mascot. But then when you put it on somebody who is also a knife wielding maniac, it gets a new creepy context.
Yeah.
So that's something I liked a lot. Let's go ahead and rate this one. I guess I'll start. Yeah, when the credits rolled, my first thought is that film was a delight. Like I said, I can't put it in the same level of meta-referential commentary on the genre as something like Cabin in the Woods or Scream, but it's definitely in the same genre. Thought the performances were good, the score was good, there was some fun editing stuff. A lot of the horror stuff was, your pretty generic slasher tropes, so it wasn't too terribly inspired. But overall, I thought it was a really solid film. Strong 3.5 out of 5 for me.
Yeah, I think this movie worked really well. I think it was just a really cleanly executed concept. We've seen Groundhog's Day before. It's been done before, but they brought something to the table, putting it into the horror genre without it feeling dreary or anything else. And that's mostly due to a really great script, really great acting, pretty solid score. I think more than anything, the mystery element of this movie helped it escape some of the tropes of the genre, which I thought was to its benefit in a lot of ways. I did have a couple minor problems. I'd probably give it a 4 out of 5. It was a really solid watch.
Honestly, like what do I have to pick apart with this film? Any questions I had, like we're open for the sequel, and we'll get into that in a second. And how those were resolved. Really, like the only critique I had was her name was Tree, and that's a little weird. And that's not even a fucking critique. Like, yeah, no, like 4 out of 5. Like, maybe, you know what? Fuck it, 4.5 out of 5. It's a great fucking movie.
All right, well, that'll give us an average of 4 out of 5 pods for Happy Death Day. And before we move on, I think it's time for a word from our sponsor this week.
Oh, is it in the middle of the episode? Oh,
You've
man.
heard podcasts before.
But I didn't have time to prepare, because I usually do prepare for these.
well,
I sure do.
here's the copy from this
Oh,
week's
thanks for
sponsor.
handing me the invisible thing.
just
Just gonna
read-
give me something to go off
Just
of.
read
Oh,
straight
great.
from it.
Yeah, awesome. Yep, it sure is. This episode is brought to you by it's brought to you by the good people at Handsome Man Incorporated. You want to be a handsome man? Then go ahead and buy some of those Handsome Man products. I really hope that's not actually a company.
What do they
I don't wanna get
sell?
sued.
What do they sell?
They sell products that make you a handsome man. You wanna have a handsome man skin? Buy that handsome man ointment. You wanna impress the ladies with that dapper haircut? You buy handsome man hair cream for the handsomest man. You name it, they got it, buddy. Have you ever been to the Handsome Man warehouse? They got it all there. They sure do.
I actually have been to the Handsome Man warehouse. I went inside and they stripped me down and lathered me up and
As is customary.
And once they rinsed me off, gosh darn it, I was more handsome than I've ever been in my life. But the only problem is it only lasts for a limited time, so you gotta keep buying those Handsome Man products.
Well, here.
And guess what? After you go once, you just get the itch. You get the itch to go back.
I am very itchy right now.
Well, I think. Oh, well, here at the end of the copy it says we have to we have to collectively sing the Handsome Man song. Apparently, so you guys ready?
Yeah.
A 1, a 2, and a 1, 2, 3.
Handsome man,
Handsome man,
handsome man.
he's a handsome man.
Wanna be a handsome
A
man.
handsome man. He is so
Lather me up and make me a handsome man. Handsome man. All right, and now we're back to the show, you guys. So we just got back from seeing Happy Death Day to You, that just came out yesterday at the time of this recording, and boy, did we have a time seeing this fucking movie.
Oh my god, we do have
Lord.
to get into this, don't we?
I feel like we have to preface our story of going to see this movie. So we drove all the way to the movie theater, and we get about 15 minutes into the film, and
Well, first off, during the trailers, there was this really loud, clanking sound.
And
over
we
in
were
the
like,
hallway.
that's weird.
Yeah.
Right.
You know?
And then thought nothing of it.
And then about 15 minutes into the movie, somebody outside the theater was drilling something into the wall, and it was just absolutely cacophonous.
And not just once.
Drowning out the
Not
film.
just once. It was continuous.
I thought it was they're fixing something real quick, it's gonna stop, and then it was going on for 10 fucking
right,
minutes.
because I thought it was okay, they must be replacing the trash can in the hallway, and they just thought it'd be quick, and then they stripped the screw, and it was being really loud, and so no one's doing anything, and it's just going on. So I get up and I run down to the hallway, and it's empty. And I realize the sound is coming from the room to the side, and they must be just drilling into the fucking wall.
Right.
And so I'm like, what the fuck is this? So I go to the front desk, and the management guys are just I was just like, hey, someone's drilling something? We can't hear the movie? And they're just oh, yeah, we're doing a renovation. I'm not sure if there's anything we could do about that. I'm like, well, we can't hear the film. And oh, cool, I guess I'll talk to the manager about it. And I'm like, all right, fuck this. So I go back to you guys in the seats.
Well, it was really funny because 30 seconds after you had left, it was just silent for the longest time, and then we just hear the longest drill yet. It went on for a solid 30, 40 seconds, and I was just oh, well, he's gone.
Cash money, the complaint got to them, and they were just fuck them, and just drilled extra long.
Who the fuck does renovation at a movie theater
During open hours.
matinee hours. Like, it's fucking, like, when we're recording this, it is Valentine's Day.
And let's be real too, like, there are probably only like, because I saw the signs, there was only like 2 or 3 other movies showing, and they have like 10 fucking theater rooms.
Right.
Like,
And they put us right next to
the renovations.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, come on. They only show movies in the theater between like noon and like maybe the late shows end just after midnight. That gives you a 12-hour window in which you can do construction and not bother anybody. Yet you decide to do it at 2 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon.
Yeah. So
While there are people in the theater next to where you are doing your construction. Oh my god. Yeah, so we just got a refund and we went to get Mexican food and margaritas.
Yeah, which I generally hate because I used to work in a movie theater, and there's nothing
Y'all both
worse
did.
than someone like coming up and asking for a refund like during or after the movie. Like, especially like for me, it's generally the worst. Like when it's like after the movie, it's like
It's
well,
like
you
sat
stayed.
through through the whole movie.
But for us, it was just like Jesus Christ. I mean, we couldn't hear the film.
My
We're 20
rule of
minutes
thumb
into it,
is you have until the halfway point. If you go over halfway, it's like eating more than half of a burger and then trying to return it. You know, like there's no problem getting a refund for a movie if you hate it immediately, you know, or if they're doing construction right outside,
yeah, that was
you
one
know.
of those things. It's like we could genuinely not hear the dialogue because of this fucking power drill. Like, it was insane. Normally, I'm not a type of guy who like wants to get refunds or anything.
Yeah, same.
But it's like we have to talk about this movie on our goddamn podcast. Like we have to actually be able to understand what's happening.
I can't fucking focus like
Right.
while that's going on. That's crazy.
Yeah, so we went and got Mexican food and a pitcher of margaritas, and then went to another showing at a different theater. So it was like reliving the same thing over and over again because we had to sit through most of the same previews because we showed up late, and then sit through the same first 20
Honestly,
minutes of the movie.
I think that's the thing I'm the most bitter about is that I had to watch the La Llorona trailer twice today.
No, you didn't, because
no.
you walked in, saw that the La Llorona trailer was going, and said, "I'm going to go to the bathroom."
Oh,
and turned
yeah,
around and
right.
walked
Yeah, you dodged that.
I forgot about that. Yeah, the margaritas hit me. Yeah.
So Happy Death Day to You picks up pretty much right where the first one ends off, or rather, a periphery character in the first one is waking up and caught in a similar death loop.
Well, yeah, it's interesting because one thing we forgot to mention is with the first one, playing off the premise with the Universal card, they played the
yeah.
Universal card like 3 times in a row. You know, kind of getting that idea
Looping
of
it back,
looping over and over again. And in this one, it's essentially split in 3, and you see 3 versions of it.
That are just like slightly off beat from one another.
Yeah. And then they combine together.
Yeah, so even before the movie starts, it gives you the idea that maybe this one's about parallel dimensions, which it is. It starts with the roommate of Carter, the love interest character from the last one. We only see him in the first one. Every time she wakes up, right as she's leaving, he walks in asking if Carter got that fine vagina. So it starts with him, you know, waking up in his car because Carter made him sleep in his car while he
Which
had
smells like Hot Pockets and feet.
which they have to keep reiterating.
But it is a nice car.
It is a Kia Soul, yeah. That was probably a little bit of product placement. Then so we follow him and we see that he is working on with some of his friends some sort of mysterious science project to prove that you can slow down time at a molecular level. Is that what they're doing?
I don't remember what its
was-
initial
yeah,
premise was.
like-
It's a big science sphere that does
and we're
something.
bombarding particles with lasers, and it does things.
It does time things.
and we use the word algorithm a lot.
Yeah, convoluted mess just to get the plot going.
Yep, which is fine.
Yeah, for this movie, I didn't have a problem with it. There's a lot of that, which I think they acknowledge is intentionally
fully.
Convoluted time nonsense.
They have characters like remark on it. Like even like when like the science guy like simplifies it for her, she's still like, this is still bullshit. Like
The movie, I think, starts off really strong with Carter's buddy going through his day. We kind of get the same setup as the first movie,
Right.
except very much abridged. And then he gets killed and wakes up, realizes what happened, and immediately he knows something's up.
Yeah, and on his second loop walks in and sits down and be like, man, and it's like I'm having deja vu. And then Tree is like, wait a second,
Hold
what are
up.
you talking about?
I really liked that. I really appreciated how they condensed that sequence. Like, all right, cool. You know, we're assuming you've seen the first one. Let's just sit you down and like let's roll through this. We're not going to rehash.
Oh
and
yeah, she
reboot.
does a literal recap where we get a bunch of little flash cut
Yeah, and it lasts
bits
maybe
from the first one
maybe a minute, and
with voiceover. Yeah,
and even then, like she interjects like some fresh joke material into it. Like so, it was really nice, really condensed. And even like his loop, which we see, is condensed compared to hers. Like she goes down the whole like what would you call that? The college,
quad.
the quad. Yeah, she goes
Yeah.
down the quad, and there's a number of events that take place throughout her day. Whereas his is just around a street corner. You know, he rounds a bend, and there's like 5 things that happen. Bing, 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 done and over, and we move on.
Yeah.
And again, loved that. Like, really appreciated it. This film condensed it. I've seen a bunch of movies, especially lately, like for the podcast, like films that use sequels as like an opportunity to pad out their runtime, and this film does not do that at all.
Yeah, well, we talked about in our Shyamalan episode a few weeks ago
God, yeah.
that in a lot of ways Glass felt like an extended epilogue of both Split and Unbreakable.
Sequences from both movies.
And
rehashed.
I would say that after seeing Happy Death Day to You, in a lot of ways makes the first one seem like a prologue to the second
don't
one.
know if I agree.
I
And
think
the
it-
reason why is I think this movie in the first 20 minutes sets itself up to do an interesting reappropriation and kind of new take on that with Carter's friend. And, early on, they try to escape him getting killed by going to a basketball game. He gets hunted down there. He almost gets killed, and they end up killing the killer. And not killing him, but they knock him out and realize it's Carter's friend.
Yeah.
And I thought, having that conceptually was a really cool avenue to go down. You start the time loop, time paradox type of thing. And I thought having 2 of them was a really cool idea. Mm-hmm. And then I feel like they kind of abandoned that for the same thing as the last one.
Well, exactly. Well, like which is what I think Jesus' point was. And I kind of appreciated that. I liked that the camera like centered back to Tree again.
Yeah, no, because the idea is that
The focus.
the machine or whatever that they've created has sort of created a time paradox, sci-fi stuff, and so Ryan has to kill himself in order to stop the dimensions from like doing something happening.
Yeah,
And
that was really convoluted.
all time travel, multi-dimensional stuff like that is convoluted.
Yeah, but they emphasize it more in this movie than they did
I-
Happy Death Day.
just in order to get Tree into the alternate dimension.
Yeah,
Like,
but I would have much rather see more with Ryan than see just Tree go about the same
I
thing
disagree.
with it being recontextualized in a different way.
yeah,
My favorite
I
moments
disagree,
were
too.
that that actually brings me to my next bit about like my next Raimi comparison. Like she goes full Bruce Campbell in this movie, and it was great.
Yeah,
Like,
I know.
like her reaction, just like, all right, fuck it, and like goes outside and is just like her reactions to those sequences. Like we get another take on that, and it's so different from the others. And it was one I kind of wanted to see, and like her really now that we've seen her become this like badass character because of what she's been, we get to see her kind of like exercise her muscle a little bit.
and I think recontextualizing it also allows for further development of her character, which we got in the first one, and I don't have a problem with them continuing to focus on her. Like, when they turn the machine on again, she's knocked into an alternate dimension that is almost the same, except she's not dating Carter, her roommate is not trying to kill her, and most importantly, her mother is still alive. Because that was a big deal in the first one, is that she and her mother have the same birthday, so her birthday is hard for her because her mother's been dead for 3 years, and it's all about, her coming to terms with her mother's death. And they say that early on in the second one, where she's like, knowing that it was just a science experiment that caused the loop, is like, it's ironic because I thought I, ended the loop because it was about me coming to terms with my mom's death.
Mm-hmm.
And Carter's like, well, does that really change anything? Like, does that change the fact that you've grown as a person, And I think that to put then, where she's sort of at peace with who she's become, and then to put her in this alternate universe where
she has to come to terms with her mother's death again.
Well, she has to choose between having something new and moving forward with Carter, or living in the past and having her mom. So I think it's quite different, and I think that it recontextualizes her character in a way that allows for more growth. Like, the Ryan character is a fun, goofy character to laugh with, at the beginning for the setup, but I don't think I would have wanted to spend the whole movie with that character.
No, he's fairly dopey. Like, he isn't that in control where she knows everything to do. Like, he was a mechanism to knock Tree into the other universe.
Fairness, we start with a really unlikable character at the beginning of the first one, and I think the reason it works is because there's an arc.
No, but he's not an unlikable character, but I don't think he's
But there's room for growth in that character, and they kind of just abandon it. I feel like it's a weird way.
It's not about him.
Well, yeah, and I think that's one of its shortcomings in starting the movie as it does. Because I think the first 20, 30 minutes are much stronger than the rest of the movie, in my opinion.
I don't feel that.
I think because essentially the first movie is about her coming to terms with her mother's death in a lot of ways. By doing that more directly, with more sentimentality, made it feel a little more hokey for me, because it's more about that than anything else in the movie, In the first one, it was there, but it didn't shove it in your face like we were talking about before.
Yeah, but when you're dealing with the same premise of the time loop and it being restarted when you die and having to relive the same day, I think having the stuff with her mom being alive in the other dimension and having to decide whether she wants to stay in this dimension or go back to the one where she's with Carter, I think it
raises the stakes.
It raises the stakes.
There was no other, in any other context, the stakes wouldn't have been raised.
And
like,
it's
the
like
game wouldn't have really been changed. Like, at this point, death is fairly insignificant. It's the loop that's significant. So we have to bring value to the loop. And also, when it comes to the sentimentality, like, I was hit even more in the sequel by that. In the first one, it was like, oh, why am I not mad at this? It's kind of cute and it gets me a little bit. But in the second one, I was like, oh shit, I really feel something here. And even though in some cases there's even more saccharine, and largely that's because at this point Tree is so well established. These moments are more meaningful with her. Now that we've gotten to see her arc, we are given opportunities to relate with her.
Yeah, I agree. I think I would have been less enthusiastic about this movie if it was once again just about figuring out a way to stop the loop.
But I think it's a lot like Ash from Evil Dead to Army of Darkness. Like by the end of Army of Darkness, like you get who he is.
I think in a way this movie is more about that than the first one, though, because the first one is about, finding who killed her to end the loop. And this one is all about ending the loop so she can either stay or go back.
Well, ending the
that's
loop,
so direct in this one.
Ending the loop is the mechanism, but the question that actually has stakes is which dimension she chooses to stay in. And like figuring out how to end the loop and send her back is the mechanism that gives her the time to figure out the answer to that question, because she does have to keep doing the same thing over and over again and experiencing things in different ways that give her a different perspective on the events. And I think that that is more what the movie is about her journey from wanting to stay with her mom to deciding to embrace the future because she did come to terms with her mother's death in the last film. And her being able to recognize that and choosing an uncertain but potentially hopeful future, that's the arc throughout. I liked that a lot, rather than just rehashing the first movie.
Yeah, I felt it to be fairly poignant. Like, there are a couple of moments like where those points were brought to home, and I found it to be fairly powerful. Like, for instance, like when she's talking with her parents and her mom brings up, oh, hey, let's go to that bakery or whatever, and she's like, what bakery? And she's like, oh, we went there last year. And you see that register on her face, and again, she's a great actress, so you really feel it with her, like, oh shit, that's not
that she's
me.
living
This isn't who I'm meant to be.
She's living somebody else's life.
Yeah, and it's powerful. Like I
agree.
It hit me really nicely.
Yeah, I feel like I've just seen that so many times before, sticking with the past or moving forward in movies so much that...
I mean, maybe, but, it's the same with seeing the idea of being stuck in a time loop, like it might be something that's tried and true, but in its presentation and execution, it's successful.
Yeah, like there are plenty of songs about falling in love, but they're good songs.
Yeah, well, no, I agree with you, Cleveland. Like, yeah, maybe it's something we've seen before, but it still resonated with me in a way that made me enjoy it. Like I didn't feel like, oh, I've seen this before. And that's a combination of, I think, the acting being so good and the characters being so well developed that I'm actually invested in what's happening to them.
I mean, shit, I'm a concept artist. Like, originality is extremely important to me, but I don't value it like wholly above everything else. I think that execution is equally important, and in this case, like, I think that premise was well executed.
Yeah, I just kind of wish they went crazier with the time loop type of stuff. With that stuff, you have a chance to really go balls to the walls and bonkers with it, especially with the comedic tone they were trying to set in a lot of it. On one hand, go full on comedic with it, and on the other hand, go on full on sentimental with it. Kind of clashed.
I don't think so. I think that it works in
Shakespeare
just fine. Romeo and Juliet has very funny moments. Like the stuff with Mercutio is hilarious. But it inherently ends in tragedy. Like, it's done. Like, I think that you can have both in a film and it be successful.
I think it's just
pretty balls to the walls too.
I think it just misses some potential for that. How does it go balls to the wall, in your opinion?
She rams her car into the power plant. There's a massive explosion. You get all those great cuts of her, like, committing suicide, like jumping out of the airplane and, like, landing in front of the couple.
Well,
There's the blood explosion.
Yes, that's not quite playing in with time in the same way I'm talking about, though, because we're talking about time paradoxes, multiple dimensions and stuff like that. You have so much opportunity to just go wild with that stuff that they really restrain themselves in their scope to essentially what's the original movie, just recontextualized, that I feel like you're missing some potential.
Well, I guess what I'll ask is, what would you have wanted to see then?
Sure.
Like,
Well,
give me an example.
Okay. So I think where the first one is very much a meta movie about the horror genre, this movie is not that at all. It's very sentimental. It's very sincere.
I felt like this movie had more meta moments in it than the first one.
Yeah, I think so too.
Like, it has a ton of self-commentary in it. I mean, it even starts with, like, the Back to the Future, or about midway into the film, like that same moment where they bring up Groundhog Day at the that same moment in time. Anyway, when they bring up Groundhog Day in the first movie, they bring up Back to the Future, which it was funny to me because I was even thinking in my head during that scene, I was like, man, this like really reminds me of like a Spielberg film. And Back to the Future 2 is where like there's a genre shift, between the films. Like they go in that different direction.
And I think that there's a lot of very self-aware stuff especially in the second half with the killer and there being two of them, and how it's sort of like secondary to the main plot because like the killer's not coming after her, but she feels a responsibility to still try to stop the killer because it's affecting other people rather than her. And then to have it be intentionally convoluted over and over again at the final confrontation where the second killer turns out to be the professor who she was having an affair with in the last movie but is now having an affair with her roommate
who's originally trying to kill her.
And then
the wife shows up.
And then the professor's wife shows up.
And then she just acts like fucking Palpatine, which is great because throughout both of the films, like everyone, like all the commentary focused around her characters. She's so nice. Why would anyone do anything to her? And she's the worst of all.
And then the professor's just like, I want a divorce, and shoots her. And it's just like in the span of like 5 minutes, it just continues.
It just reinforces, I gotta get out of this world. This world is fucking dumb.
It continues to get more and more cartoonishly convoluted in a way that's obviously extremely intentional.
I would even say balls to the walls. Like
I was just wishing there was more of that though. I think it went balls to the wall there, and we get that Carter has a girlfriend in the other sorority girl, like the mother queen one.
And that in this universe, she's a completely different character.
Yeah.
And the stuff where she's pretending to be the blind French girl.
I thought that stuff was awesome, but I just wish there was more of that. Well, I think they don't go far enough with that concept, because while there is a couple moments of that, it doesn't feel like that different of a world.
I don't know. It feels like a logical escalation of the first movie, and considering the post-credit scene we got that is setting up the third movie, which you said is already in production, right? Yeah. With fucking DARPA showing up and seizing the machine and then having to bring them to the lab because we don't know how to work it and we figured you guys might be able to help us out. Like, it's so fucking corny and 80s.
Yeah, the men in black show up.
Right, exactly. Jesus. No, I think that's extremely self-aware, and I think it's setting it up for a further escalation of the craziness into whatever the third one is going to be.
Not unlike the Back to the Future trilogy.
That's true.
Yeah, well, I mean, in fairness, in my opinion, the second one is the weakest of the Back to the Future trilogy.
Is that the West or the future one?
The future one.
The future one's my favorite.
I think the problem I have with it is it essentially just acts as a bridge between the first and the third movie.
Over the Western one, though? Like, the commentary in the future one is so good. That's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, but I think a good example of what I was hoping for with this movie is, since I think the first one is so well contained, they needed to escalate it in a different way. I was thinking of movies like 22 Jump Street, for example, which is Phil Lord and Chris Miller, like I was talking about before. But they take that same concept and turn it to 11 in a lot of ways. Just go absurdist and very over the top with it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the reason it works for me, where this movie doesn't quite go far enough in that respect to really hit all of its marks. I still think the acting is as great as it was in the first. I think the writing in terms of dialogue is still snappy and really solid.
I think this one is. I think I laughed more in this one than I did in the first one.
It's really
granted, the first one was much more focused on writing the line between horror and comedy, whereas I think this one is much more so just a straight comedy.
Yeah, it dropped horror and went sci-fi.
Yeah, it is very sci-fi. Like, there's still the killer aspect, but it's in the periphery.
Yeah.
Which I was okay with. But
if the killer bit, like when she goes to the alternate dimension, had still been on like the front line and had been that twist, I think it would have been frustrating. But because the killer was like a totally secondary aspect of the mechanism at that point,
right?
Like,
her
that was
dying,
the way to do it. Yeah.
Her dying over and over in this one was her continuing to kill herself because she had to memorize all of the algorithms and tell them the next day when they didn't remember which ones didn't work. So she just had to keep killing herself. So I thought that stuff was really fun.
Yeah, it was really great too, like how in the span of like 2 regular days, she's gone from being this like horrible sorority asshole to being like a good person who like has a deep understanding of quantum theory.
In 2 real world days.
Yeah.
No, that is pretty funny.
Yeah.
I didn't have a problem with,
I loved it.
Yeah, I actually really liked the second one. The more I talk about it and the more I think about it, the more I think I prefer it to the first one. Just like the first one, I left the theater thinking that was delightful.
It was delightful. I will give it that.
I had a good time.
Both of the movies are very much delightful. I do have, more issues with the second one just because I feel like it was some missed potential. But I think for what it was pretty okay. It was pretty solid. I really like the principal character that they introduced in this one.
Yeah.
I think
that was another thing that reminded me of 80s films so much, like something like Ferris Bueller's Day Off, where you have the villainous teacher character who's like trying to foil the teenagers' plans. He was great.
Yeah, he was great. The whole scene where the other sorority girl comes in acting like a blind French girl.
That was fucking
because
probably my
because
favorite
in this
scene
alternate
of the
universe,
movie.
she's an actor, and
she's a more decent person. She's not as scummy as she is.
When she is, she's just scuzzy in a different way,
Right.
And it's great stuff.
Here's a question for you. Speaking of that character, at one point near the end of the movie, they introduced that she's cheating on
I did think that was weird.
Carter.
Oh yeah.
I didn't like that.
I didn't hate it. I thought that was fine. I just thought it was. Did Tree never mention it to Carter?
No.
That's what I thought was weird.
That's also what
I was
I
like,
thought was
why
weird.
didn't she tell him?
I will say too.
He's still in that dimension.
It kind of undermines the choice between Carter or his...
That is something that I
Yeah,
definitely
his
agreed
mother.
on, because especially like right as she's about to go back, like as they're kissing in the hospital in slow motion, like right as they're activating the machine.
I
it's
love
like
that shot,
so it's
too.
like oh
It's
so
so
at this
hokey.
so at this point in this universe too, Carter has chosen her. So in
Which I
theory, she could stay in this universe and have both.
Yeah,
She had Carter and
exactly.
her
It
mom.
totally undermines the whole theme we were talking about
don't-
in this movie.
I don't think it does. I think it's cool because what ended up happening, like her little hero's journey, is she visited this alternate dimension and she left a positive change on it. Like when the proper her like re-enters that universe, like she's made that person's life a little bit better. Like that
okay.
version
No,
of
I
herself.
can see that.
Like I wish it would have been nice to have seen it, but like I think that's what's established there. Carter has
get on
figured
board with
out,
that.
and he's figured out like that. Oh, maybe she's a better person than this. Not just because of like an external circumstance, like him getting cheated on and being like, oh, she's a bad person, therefore I should be with this person. He realized he should potentially be with her because of her goodness. I think that worked.
But I think the other sorority girl is portrayed as a good character until we see that she's cheating.
What? Absolutely not. I do not think that way at all. I think during that lunch sequence, like
I think she's equally vapid, but
Yeah.
just in a different way.
She's vapid and dumb, but she's not evil in the same way she was in the first one.
She's not.
it's definitely not likable
She's
to
not
like.
cruel, but yeah, I don't think she's still not particularly likable.
Like her whole monologue about like donating and like for those like children's associations, but like not wanting to hug them for too long because they're grubby. Like those aren't hallmarks of being a good people. The whole like
wasn't it
being so
worded
full of
as
herself to be
the kids were hugging for too long, but you get used to it, is what she said.
Yeah, because like, and she, it's worth the hardship of having to hug children. And before that, like also mentioning like she's trying really hard for this acting role, and it's clearly all about her, like because she hasn't done any research on the source material.
Well, I think it's just a weird thing to do, especially when you end on such a cruel ending for that character in the main timeline, where after in the post-credit scene, we see them go to DARPA and put her in a time loop forever.
Because they need a test subject.
Yeah, and like I think that's the reason they set up them cheating in an alternate dimension, but still it feels kind of unjustified. Like
I don't know. I mean, does the
she's-
premise of the first movie feel unjustified? Like, did you feel bad when she was a vapid, like, sorority person? Because it's the same premise, like, as her. It's just a different person. But they're both vapid sorority girls.
The
at the
difference
beginning.
is there's a choice in putting someone in that position versus someone being a victim of that circumstance.
Well,
you
no,
know-
they say test subject. Like, we don't know if it's willing yet or not. Like, we don't see that conversation. We might in the third movie. But we don't know that she's unwilling. Like, that's not made clear.
I mean, she doesn't know that she's getting into a time loop by the way she responds in the very end when she screams in her bed. Like, it's very clear that she wasn't a knowing participant in this.
Potentially. I mean, we don't know what she's screaming from. We don't know what the other, like, outlying circumstances
Yeah,
are.
I don't think we can speculate too much on that, but I do think that while she's not as like openly cruel as she is in the original timeline, I still don't think she's portrayed as a particularly good person. It's more like she does these things so she can get the praise from it, that it's really more about
I mean, she
her.
in the first movie, like, she stomps on people around her too. Like, there's like the sorority meeting scene, and like she like reduces that other girl to tears. Like, she's a bad person.
Yeah, but I mean, I think the ending scene just made me question that a little bit in terms of, yes, she's bad, but does she deserve to be unknowingly stuck in a time loop? Put in a time loop.
Tree didn't know why she was put in the time loop either, and through the time loop, she stopped being a shallow, bitchy sorority girl and became a good
like,
person.
I think
out
that's
of
what
it.
like the little nod is between all of them. It's like, hey, who could like really use some character building? Guess what? And then
Right,
roll
like
that
maybe they
scene.
put her in the same loop and get a similar result. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see when the third one
Yeah,
comes.
But it's like
Inevitably.
the time loop is inherently like it's a cycle out of death. Like, it's about as safe as it could be in that regard. Like, I think like it's definitely a nod towards like, oh yeah, like she could use some character building. I went through this.
That's one thing I wanted to talk about a little bit. You talk about the cycle of death not being, that harmful. The least harmful it could be. But they do mention in both movies, the more times you die, the weaker you get.
I think,
and that
I think
was
that is
totally
up until
unclear
the cycle is
in
broken.
both movies.
Yeah, it is. Well, especially in the first
because they
one.
don't act weaker really, besides the one time they collapse in both movies.
She acts weaker when it's convenient for the plot for her to act weaker. It's one of the loosest parts of the film.
I
do
agree.
agree with that.
I didn't like that very much in either film.
Yeah, it doesn't bother me just because like it. I think the assumption is like that is broken when the loop is ended.
It's not harmful in the sense that there are no lasting consequences to your actions because you just restart the day. But I mean, if you never escape the loop, like that, it is literally hell. You're like literally caught in eternity and not being able to change anything and never growing and never changing your relationships with people and never able to finally die. So I think it is harmless in the sense that as long as you can escape it, you can you can grow as a person and as a character, but obviously
like exploring any dungeon.
Like
any adventure.
nobody wants to be caught in the time loop. Both movies are about ending the time loop.
Yeah.
So it's I think it's
It was like that forced ticking clock.
it's
in
a
this
good
movie.
it's a good character building exercise. Y'all want to rate?
Yeah, I don't have much more to say.
Okay.
About this movie.
Yeah, I liked this movie a lot. Surprisingly, the sentimentality stuff didn't bother me. It made sense as development for Tree's character, and I walked out of that theater thinking I should give my mom a call. And I thought it was really fun. I thought it was delightful. I laughed a lot. Overall, a much better movie than I was expecting. I think and I guess we'll get into this in a few minutes, but I think when we made our predictions for these movies, I was pretty cynical about it. I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 5. I liked this movie quite a bit.
Yeah, well, I wasn't quite as keen on it as both of you guys. I enjoyed a lot of it. I mean, a lot of the strongest elements of the first one carried over to this one, whether it was the acting or the writing, the music, or even some of the editing choices. You know, you get some similar edits where she like falls and it transitions the scene in a really cool way. I thought all of that stuff was really cool. I just feel like they kind of missed out on some potential to take it drastically in a new direction and something that feels a little more fresh than this one did. I was kind of underwhelmed by that. The sentimentality kind of fell flat for me as well. Like I said in the first one, the more you inspect time loop stories, the more gaps in logic there are. And since they delved into that a little bit further in this movie, some of those problems were a little more apparent for me. So I'm going to give this a 3 out of 5. I still think it's worth checking out, but I would definitely recommend seeing the first one first.
Yeah, I loved it. I think that this film approached like sci-fi with the same sort of tongue-in-cheek level of commentary that it approached horror in the first one. I loved it. I loved how cleanly it was built into the first one. I definitely got a vibe that the scripts were written at the same time, which is a rarity and a luxury. The acting was hilarious. The one-liners were great. I was giggling throughout this entire movie, and was even hit by the sentimental moments unexpectedly. I'm going to give this film the same rating I gave the first one, 4.5.
That will give Happy Death Day to You a slightly lower average than the first one, 3.9 out of 5 pods. Or excuse me, 3.8. Yeah, I liked it. I think it's
that's a very appropriate rating.
I think it's
pretty solid.
if you're looking for something fun to go see in the theater, either with your friends or with your boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever, it's a good one to get some laughs out of. And while I agree, I think you'll appreciate the second one more if you see the first one. I don't think you have to, because the first one does a nice abbreviated recap, so you'll
get more out of it though. Like
you'll get more
her
out
reactions to it, like seeing her grow as a character.
You'll get more out of it, but you won't be lost going into the second one, not having seen
They
the
make
first
it
one.
very welcoming to new viewers.
Yeah. Okay, so now that we've done that, let's check our results.
Yeah, so this is the third movie we predicted in our 2019 preview. If you haven't listened to that one, check it out. We put it out near the beginning of the year. Obviously, this movie just came out, so we don't have the full weekend box office.
Yeah, we'll
yet.
update on that.
We'll have that next week. But we have a preliminary Rotten Tomatoes score. Again, this might change before next week as well, as more reviews come in. Matisse, you predicted a Rotten Tomatoes score of 48.
Jesus Christ.
Before you say any of my predictions, I do remember our conversation the other day. I'm just saying, like, I already have immediate regrets about them, and God, if I could just go back in that time loop and just kill my previous self or whatever, like, that would be
Hey, but
great.
then you'll make us
So
get
I'm
into
very
a time
aware of
loop.
how dumb my predictions are. That's what I'm saying.
Hey, you're in the lead.
You're still winning.
I know. It's an embarrassing estimate to make.
You guessed 50, so you're closer technically. And
Rotten
I guessed
Tomato score is fine. It's the budgeting one that I'm really concerned with.
I guessed 65, and it turns out right now this movie is sitting at a 66.
Oh, shit.
So I'm almost straight
One
on the
off.
money. Yeah, we'll see how it ends up by next week.
Yeah,
but
we'll make
so
we'll do
far,
an update.
it looks like I might be tied with you, Cleve.
Hey.
All right, it's time to enter the Hot Take
Take
Zone.
You find yourself in a strange room, an academic circle. Every point you bring up is followed with a counterpoint. All you can see is disagreement. Nothing makes sense here. You have entered the Hot Take Zone.
All right, so my hot take of the week. This is an interesting one, I think. The last one spurred a lot of conversation, so I'm excited to see if this one spurs as much. I think this one we may be more in agreement on, but I think in general it's a bit of a hot take.
Okay.
the zombie genre is one of the most overrated genres of horror, is way overdone, and most of the movies in the zombie genre are bad.
Now, is this your belief, or is this just a hot take that is hot?
This is my belief.
It is your belief.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't know if there are more bad zombie movies than there are bad vampire movies.
Thank
or
you.
anything like
I was
that.
about to fucking
But I will.
say, yeah,
but I will 100% agree that zombies are overplayed as shit, and I am so tired of
And
them.
I think the biggest thing in that is the percentage of bad vampire movies might be higher, but the output of bad zombie
what I will
movies is
say, though,
higher.
is
There's too many of them.
What I will say is that and I think this is one of the big reasons why zombies are so overbaked too, is they're incredibly safe compared to vampires. Think about the bad zombie movies you've seen, and then think about the bad vampire movies you've seen, and think about the cringe factor, right? Bad vampire movies are really fucking cringy, right?
Yeah,
in a way that zombie movies can't be. They're just
zombie movies are just
lukewarm.
boring, yeah.
And like I think that's part of the problem is like even when zombie movies are bad, they're inoffensive, and that's a dream for a marketing team. Right, and that helps that can help your project be greenlit. And when it's that popular in the zeitgeist, it's fairly cheap. It's fairly easy to make, especially over vampire stuff. Vampire stuff generally tends to feature more stunts, also more writing. Because it's not just action oriented generally.
Vampires usually have to be sexy.
Yeah.
Not always.
Yeah. Well, here's the second part of that hot
there's more
take,
budget.
and the thing I want to elaborate on with this a little bit is, I think vampires are so humanoid that they make a good depersonalized enemy for good guys to take down without looking evil for murdering things, Like,
Sure, they're an other. Like,
Yeah.
in the same way that zombies are, yeah.
well, I was talking about zombies.
You said vampires.
Oh, I did?
You
Okay,
did say
I meant zombies.
Don't you gaslight me now.
Yeah, I meant zombies.
Yeah, sure.
Because that's an easy way to just make that marketable as an action trope without getting into moral issues at all.
Yeah, and I think going back to vampires is that because vampires either began as people or are so similar to people and that they are still aware and conscious, there opens up a lot more ground for that question on morality. Like, how many vampire movies have you seen where the vampires are actually the good guys and that the vampire hunters are the bad guys?
Yeah, and I think the gap there is the humanization.
Right, exactly. Whereas
the intelligence.
Zombies are a symbol of mindless consumerism. All they do is walk and eat, and they're completely devoid of anything that
it's funny because even
human.
in the Omega Man or the original I Am Legend, the zombies in it are much more akin to vampires.
Yes.
They have dialogue. Yeah, I agree. I think it's tricky for me. I mean, yes, like zombies very much so exist as an other you can feel comfortable like killing in your fantasy. It's an excuse to engage in mass slaughter, like from a morally freeing perspective. And
there's not
that you can take what you want from it.
In some ways, there's not a lot of depth into moral questions with zombies. It's more about the human interaction in a world with zombies more than anything else. Whereas with vampires, you do have more of those questions.
Yeah. It's a more nuanced.
I think also, in a way, while the Dawn of the Dead trilogy is some of the greatest, examples of zombie movies, I think they kind of also ruined the genre in a lot of ways because every zombie movie after that falls into the same zombie tropes pretty much. The only difference is whether they're slow or fast zombies.
I wouldn't blame a good work for its shitty imitations.
No, I agree with that. I don't think that the Dead trilogy is to blame for that. It's more of
the shitty copies are to blame for.
Lack of imagination in advancing or developing on the ideas that the Dead trilogy establishes. The Dead trilogy is like the gold standard for zombies. Like that is the the best
Yeah,
instances
I agree.
of it done right, and you have so many cheap imitations where people are really lazy about it. It's like, oh yeah, I like Dawn of the Dead, make a zombie movie.
Yeah, well, and I think that's the double-edged sword of having such a gold standard. I think while it is a legitimately great movie and a great series, I think it has cemented in filmmakers' idea that to make a zombie movie, you have to make a Romero movie.
Yeah, okay.
You know?
To a degree.
And in a lot of ways, that isn't necessarily true. I mean, some of my favorite zombie movies outside of that are completely different, you know, in
Yeah.
terms of how zombies are made, you know, what it takes to kill them. I think of like Return of the Living Dead, for example, where they're like hive mind flesh beasts almost, but still very much zombies. And they're semi-intelligent and stuff. You know, you don't see many different takes of zombies in the zombie genre.
Yeah,
I
for the
mean,
most part.
it's all pretty much the same.
Yeah, I mean the biggest key differences are whether they move fast or slow, really, and
Yeah.
that's true. I know it's not a film, but I do want to bring up.
If you say The Walking Dead.
no,
Okay.
it's funny. It would seem like I was. No, the Last of Us. Actually, I did want to bring up that. I think like that is their approach to zombies is fairly original with the clickers and like the fungal growths. Like they
Being plant-based.
yeah, like they have a really nice aesthetic to them that did feel very original to me. And terrifying too, and also as a narrative went, like that does not leave you want for writing.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite written games.
But you know, it's the Last of Us
and 28 days
also-
later, like you know.
But the thing is that which we sort of touched on already, that The Last of Us also does, is that zombies, like zombie stories, are not so much about the zombies themselves. It's how humanity and society devolves in the wake of the zombies.
Yeah.
In The Last of
they're
Us,
a setting.
right? They're a setting. You know, it's like
They're the walls of the
they're
saloon.
they're
Yeah, in the
they
West.
are no they are they
Yeah.
are they're a disaster. You know, it's like they are mindless. They are in a sense a force of nature, whether it's man-made or not. And then
They're
you
the
look at
backdrop of the apocalypse.
right, and then in stuff like The Last of Us and fucking Dawn of the Dead, it's like and even The Walking Dead, when The Walking Dead was good, it's not about the zombies, it's about the real villains are the other people. The people who use the backdrop of a zombie apocalypse as an excuse to descend into sadism and cruelty
Right.
and selfishness and stuff like that. So it's like zombies make a really good backdrop, but as interesting villains, they're not.
And
they're not much
I
of
think
one.
that's why things like vampirism or outbreaks in general are a little more interesting, because you still have that concept of things that spread, infections, stuff like that are legitimately horrifying, but at the same time you don't lose that humanization
Right.
that you get in, you know, movies of that genre.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my hot
It's the
take.
human stories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They both they come out of a similar thing. I mean, like vampire lore is, you know, largely built on like Vlad the Impaler and innumerable genocides. Of Wallachia, I think was the name of the nation. And
Yeah,
then
what is now Transylvania?
yeah, and again, like zombie work is largely about genocide as well. Like, and it's about, you know, like, about the act of killing, you know, but killing another that you can feel morally right about killing. But things we've already been over. Which again,
Yeah,
is
well,
why
it's
so
funny
widely
because
used.
originally zombies, it was all about like voodoo magic and,
Yeah,
you know,
the zombie
reanimating one from the
Yeah.
dead.
is,
Whereas with the Romero movies, it became about reanimating the masses from the dead. Rather than reanimating one, it's about reanimating the many. And I think that's part of the reason it dehumanizes it a little
it's-
bit as
because
well.
The original, it's Haitian in origin, right?
Yeah.
And like
Yeah.
you're essentially reanimating a corpse to make it your
slave.
hapless
Yeah.
slave. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
And
And
there
it
are
is-
no films about that, and I think that
That's-
could be cool.
That's not true.
There's a few.
Ooh, tell me some, man. And are they good?
There's a lot of like, or several like really old black and white, like 30s and 40s era.
Sure, but modern films that,
yeah,
that try to adapt that premise. I'd be curious to see.
I don't know. The most contemporary ones I know about are like 70s blaxploitation zombie movies.
Yeah,
that
which
follow
seems
that.
incredibly problematic. Yeah.
All I'll say is, in a few weeks we've got Pet Cemetery coming up.
Yeah, and I think that's the closest thing.
I won't spoil too much else, but we can get back into this when we talk about Pet Cemetery.
I will say overall though, like I'm not that largely offended or bothered by, because I think that was the hot take, right? Like, it's problematic. It's overdone. Yeah, I think it is, but I think murder mysteries are overdone too. I think there's a lot of stuff like when we just different things hit our zeitgeist and we go fucking ape for it. And zombies are the latest one, so we're particularly tired of it for that.
And
right now.
I think
but inherently there are good zombie movies. Yeah. There are mostly bad ones, but that goes for just about any genre. So yeah,
this is a take that was spicier like 5 years ago, but at this point I think
it's less of a hot take now, because I think that finally the large majority of people are also starting to get tired of zombies.
It's fallen out of the old zeitgeist.
Just for fun, I have an idea to end out this segment. We're gonna say, how spicy was this take?
On a scale, what's our scale?
Spiciness, like food spiciness. And of course, you have the nuclear option if it's something you think is a nuclear take. But other than that, you can say how spicy you think it was.
2 out of 5. 2 out of 5 spicy.
I meant in terms of like food. I think this is
2
like
out of 5 spicy.
You eat
peppers.
2 out of 5. Okay.
Out of 5 peppers.
Oh, I was gonna say like pick an analog. Like this is like a nice barbecue sauce. Spicy
honestly,
take.
for me, I would say I don't consider it that hot of a take, mostly just because I strongly agree with it and have for a long time.
I think it's a good conversation point.
So for me, I would say on a scale of spiciness, Tabasco sauce.
I think it's a tasty conversational point. I'd put it on my ribs, but I don't think it's that spicy. So I'm gonna say
it ain't making me sweat.
Yeah, no, it's some mild barbecue sauce.
Mild barbecue sauce. There we go. There we have it, folks.
All right, zombies are overdone. A nice mild barbecue sauce. All right, that'll bring us to the end of this episode. Next week, what is next week?
What even is?
Next week
is it Happy Death Day again?
Yes, it is Happy Death Day.
Cool.
No,
see you later.
I believe next week.
Oh, okay. So we're going back to staff picks. And next week is my pick, and we're going to be talking about the 1988, I believe, Dutch horror film, The Vanishing.
Cool.
I'm extremely excited to see this movie again. It's been a long time. I've only seen it once, but I found it profoundly impactful and disturbing. So cool. I'm very stoked. And neither of you guys have seen this, right?
I'm very excited. I've heard very good things.
All right. Well, tune back in next week for The Vanishing. If you like the show and want to support us, hit those 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, leave us a nice little review, or wherever else you listen to this show. Help us climb up in the numbers. Follow us on Twitter at PodPeoplePod. Send us more hot takes. I tweeted out yesterday asking for some, so hopefully we'll get some soon rolling in. And if you have a spicy enough take, you might hear us talk about it.
Yeah, give us some of those Pepper X takes.
Yeah, get it in there. You can follow us on Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/podpeoplepod. See our our average ratings and links to the episodes and all that good shit. Follow me on Twitter at Mr. Van Awesome. Maybe.
I'm at Mr. Sheets. Send me your spicy takes.
I'm tweeting for Light Arc Studios. Semi regularly now. I mean, for me, that's like maybe twice a week, but that's something. And then you can find my work on ArtStation, and and hopefully in the next couple of weeks you'll find a lot more of it, because there's some things. There's some other things, the projects that I'm working on aside from It Stares Back, that are going to be
can start talking about soon enough, which will be fun.
Yeehaw!
Yup. Check 'em up. But anyway, but primarily, get some hype for It Stares Back. Look at some cool spooky artwork, and that's everything from me.
All right. Well, thank you as always for listening. We are the
Indeed.
Pod People, and until next time, start this episode over.
What's going on? Where are we?